It can cause glycation in the skin. It can cause some gumming up in the brain. It can cause um, problems with the pancreas. From when you're a little child, you probably had been rewarded at least once with sugar. If you're a good little boy or girl, they might give you a sweet. And so you ended up developing a sweet tooth, some people call it. But what is the impact a sugar has? I mean, without a doubt, our brain requires sugar. It's the primary nutrient of the brain. But excessive or deficient amounts of sugar going into the brain can cause cognitive dysfunction, or let's say cognitive impairment, let's put it that way. So I'd like to talk about sugar for a moment and the impact that sugar has. First, I'd like to just talk about taking sugar. There are different types of sugars. There's complex carbohydrates that break down into sugar slowly. There are simple sugars that go right into the bloodstream and spike it and then usually have it fall. And then there's also natural sugars that from eating fats and proteins that body metabolizes and creates back into sugar. The brain requires sugar. So I don't want to say that sugar is bad or good, but like anything else, even water, too much water or too little water can cause problems. And the same thing with sugar. If we eat more sugar than ideal, it definitely impairs our cognitive function. We get a spike, we get manic. When we get manic, we tend to get to see positive and optimistically, and we're basically blind to some of the downsides. And then when we fall and the spike goes down, we tend to be more pessimistic and irritable. And therefore, we are not thinking clearly and not centered and not posed. So anytime we eat spikes of sugar, it affects our cognitive function. It causes a spike and then a decline. And what's interesting, if you eat sugar more than ideal, you can create a leptin resistance, and as a result of it, you can then lose the feedback mechanism that the hormone leptin normally does to let you know when you're satiated, and you can tend to overeat. So excessive amounts of sugar also has an impact on leading to overeating and then obesity and type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular conditions. And eventually, if we gain some weight, it can affect our hips and our joints and our knees and our overall energy levels, which makes us more vulnerable to emotional vicissitudes and emotional volatilities. So the question is are you overeating sugar? If you're going and having a Starbucks, you might want to go and do a little research on how many sugar teaspoons are sitting in a Starbucks. I know for myself, I learned from Paul Bragg when I was 17 years old not to eat white sugar, white flour, or white salt. So I haven't added salt to my diet or eaten sugar in my diet or eaten white flour in my diet for 51 years. I try my best to try to fill my body with food that's real, that's not empty calories. But in the process of doing it, I do eat fruit sugars. I do eat vegetables that have sweet in it, that's like carrots and beets. And I also do eat breads, and that breaks down as complex carbohydrates to sugar. And my brain has adequate sugar. But I noticed that if for some reason there's a little bit more sugar than normal, that's why I don't drink a lot of fruit juices. I'll have just a sip of one because it's too much sugar and it spikes and then you go down. And when you do, you're volatile and you're emotional and your brain doesn't, it doesn't have stability. In fact, if you end up with too much sugar spikes and then letdowns, you automatically tend to get your brain focusing on your amygdala response. You tend to be more emotional and volatile. And instead of getting into your executive function where you have self-governance and executive functions where inspired vision, strategic planning, executing plans, self-governance, you tend to lose that. You tend to be irritable and you'll tend to bite and spite and react. So I tell people that you might moderate your sugar intake. It really does make a difference. It's not hard to prove and see if you just moderate it for a week and see the impact. But you might want to stop and ask, is the coffee with the sugar, the tea with the sugar, the desserts with the sugar, the foods without realizing it, that's fast foods that has sugar in it, are you really, even the yogurts out there, I eat plain Greek yogurt. I don't eat anything that has sweets in it. So I'm a very much a carbohydrate, calm down carbohydrate person. It affects your teeth, it affects your immune system, it affects your cardiovascular system, it affects your emotional volatilities, it makes you decrease your probability of having cognitive centeredness and mastery by overeating sugar. But at the same time, if you are fasting and you don't have any sugar it's released in the brain, then you end up with problems too. So too little is not wise. It's just the right amount of food. And my experience is that, I don't add sugar and I don't add honey and I don't add sweetening. I don't eat anything with sweets like that. It's just not my thing, other than fresh fruit. That's the sweetest thing I eat. And I don't have volatilities. I have stable energy, and my brain function keeps alert and sharp because of that. So I'm just letting you know that it might be wise to stop and take a look and do an inventory about your sugar intake. It can cause glycation in the skin. It can cause some gumming up in the brain. It can cause um, problems with the pancreas. When you do, you get feedbacks in the brain, and back in your feedback, as I said, to leptin and ghrelin, it throws off your eating patterns. It also, if you're eating too much sugar, and creates a need for insulin, because your blood sugar is so high, it's like stimulating it with glucagon. It now needs some insulin. You can eventually burn out your pancreas trying to create that much insulin and overdo it. And there's definitely signs that it affects the brain when it doesn't. The brain has to have a stable, steady centeredness of sugar. And if you spike it and then go the other direction, sometimes you overeat on sugars and sweets and stuff, and then you end up having a high, as you know, and get manic and do crazy things and set too big of goals in too short of time frames, then crash and then feel like you can't accomplish things. And all these things impair the executive function and stop you from mastering your life. And the other way around. I found out that people who are not living by priority, not bringing the blood glucose and oxygen into the forebrain, not having executive function, not moderating their behaviors, allowing themselves to go back into their amygdala, which requires a little less sugar than the executive functioning areas, then what happens is that area starts to make us impulsive and instinctual and make us, avoid and seek and be distracted and emotional, and we're not centered and focused. So if we don't, it works two ways. If you're not living your life by highest priority actions, you tend to go in and activate your amygdala. And at the same time, if you're eating sweets, you tend to also activate the amygdala and not the executive function. So your cognitive impairment is going on when you overeat sugars. And I tell people just to be moderate on it. Like I said, if you go to the Starbucks and you go there and they load up a bunch of syrup in there, corn syrup and things of this nature and sugar, and then you add sugar to it, this to me is insane. I mean, if you look at how many, just go look on the line and go look at how much the average person consumes sugar, the amount of tablespoons or pounds of sugar that people eat in a year, it's ridiculous. And they wonder why they have health problems and cardiovascular and over, obesity. I mean, if you go look at pictures in the 1930s and 40s and even 50s in America, you didn't see the obesity we have today. And part of it is because of sugar intake. We have complex and simple sugars that we're overeating, and we're not being told, we're not being educated, or if we are being educated, we're ignoring it. And I just very grateful I learned from Paul Bragg when I was 17 that that's not the thing to feed your body with. You're either living to eat or eating to live, and I'd prefer to eat to live. I'd rather ask myself what's the highest priority things I can be filling my body with and to help me have the most cognitive function. I have an important function of educating and researching and learning. I want my brain working. So that's why I don't eat sugars. I don't add sugars to my diet other than simple fruit and in moderation. And I have steady, stable energy because of that. So I tell people to moderate their sugars. And I didn't say eliminate them. I just said moderate them, eat wisely, to think about what you're actually feeding your body and think about the amount of sugars that you're consuming because it's going to pay a price. You will. Like I said, type 2 diabetes is not necessarily caused by the sugar, but it does wear down the pancreatic function if you just consume sugars constantly. And eventually it is a factor in diabetes. And again, with the leptin resistance, that's another factor of overeating. And both of those conditions we know are leading to problems. And we don't even realize we're doing that. So be moderate. Stop and reflect and look at what you're eating. And stop and reflect and look at what you're prioritizing. If you're not prioritizing your day and living by your highest values and getting your executive function to govern your behavior, and if you're not prioritizing what you're eating and making sure you're eating to live and perform and not just eating for immediate gratification, which is sugar, because people want a reward, and it's one of the most addictive compounds you can find on the planet is sugar. I mean, people think, oh my God, I love you. I give you chocolate and sugar and sweets. And that's a crazy message to give somebody because it's not to their advantage to overeat sugar. But a little moderation. I'm not against having your sweet occasionally, but just be aware that the content of what you're feeding your body is affecting your psychology. And if you want to maximize your mental function and your cognitive function, eat wisely. Prioritize what you're eating, prioritize what you're doing, prioritize what the actions you're taking, prioritize who you're associating with. If you're not prioritizing your life, other people are going to infiltrate it and impulsive behaviors will take over. If you're not, I always say that impulsive, addictive, and compulsive behaviors and immediate gratifying behaviors are compensations for unfulfilled highest values. That's why I tell people to make sure that they prioritize their life and prioritize their actions and prioritize their food. If you do that, you're more likely to keep yourself stable and steady and focused and energized and vital and help have wellness. Without a doubt, there's effect of gaining weight. If you've gained any weight and you've added too much sugar, you're paying a price. And I could go down the list. I mean, from tooth to, as I said, cardiovascular, weight. I mean, I've seen people that gain a little bit of weight. They're only 10 to 20 pounds overweight, but every pound they're overweight, it affects their joints. It affects their cardiovascular function. And it just goes on and on. So take the time to prioritize what you eat. Take the time to prioritize what you do. Take the time to prioritize what actions you're taking every day, who you're associating with every day, how you're living your life. If you're not living for an inspiration, you're probably going to fall for desperation. And eating sugar is not the way to maximize your potential. Eating excessive sugar. Eat moderately. Sugar has its benefits, it has its drawbacks. Your brain must have it for fuel, but it doesn't require you to eat sugar all day long. Eating natural foods, fats and proteins and other foods, your body knows how to convert that into sugar. It has sugar metabolism to do that, to make sure your brain is stable. But just know that if you eat simple sugars, stuff that you see in quick foods or whatever, you will end up having spikes and troughs, and you'll increase volatility, and you'll be more emotional, and you'll be less stable, and your cognitive function will be impaired. You'll be manic and then depressed, and hyper and then eventually irritable. And if you want that, then I guess that's fine, but you'll pay a price. It's wiser to eat moderately and think about what you put in your body. So I just know that that's one of the reasons when I teach the breakthrough experience, I teach people how to prioritize their life, prioritize their doing. Imagine this: if you have something really, really, really important to do and you know it's happening, you're about to get married, or you're about to go and put on that wedding dress, or you're about to go on a beach holiday, and you know you're going to have to be looking your best, you will very discipline yourself because you have something meaningful and priority that you're focusing on. As a result of it, you don't tend to go into volatilities and you don't tend to overeat sugars because you're more disciplined, because you know better. But if you don't have anything that's filling your day that's inspiring to you, you're more vulnerable to engage. That's why most people will blow their diet on Friday night and Saturday night, and Friday and Saturday afternoon and evening or whatever, and then they'll get back in discipline again by Sunday night because they know they've got accountabilities and responsibilities on the following day. That's why I'm a firm believer in keeping yourself busy and high priority actions so you're not as vulnerable to your immediate gratifying amygdala's responses, because that's when you tend to want to overeat sugar. And then the sugar then has a vicious cycle. It's affecting executive function, and you get into a vicious cycle. That's why prioritizing what you do and prioritizing what you're eating is important. That's why in the breakthrough experience, I teach people how to take command of their priorities, take command of what their values are, prioritize what they're doing, asking themselves really what's priority as far as eating, prioritizing who you're hanging out with. If you're hanging out with people that are very inspired by what they're doing and going places in life, you'll tend to move in that direction. If you hang out with people that are victims of history, you'll hang out in that direction. You go in that direction. So prioritize what you do in your life and watch the difference. That's why I teach in the breakthrough experience every weekend to help people take command of their life and be masters of destiny, not victims of history. And sugar in excess does not help you become master of destiny. In moderation, like many things, moderation and consistency is one thing, but excesses will pay you. You'll pay a price for that. So compensate for this maybe excess sugar by maybe stopping and reading and reflecting and thinking, is this really the highest priority thing to feed my body with? It's your body. It goes by quick. Your life goes by quick. I'm nearly 70 years old, and and I'll be 70 in a few months, and here I am. I realize how fast that goes. So you want to feed your mind and feed your body wisely. Anyway, that's my message for today. And I hope to see you at the breakthrough experience so I can teach you how to prioritize your daily actions according to your highest values and to prioritize what you're eating so you can take command of your life and get the most out of life, because life goes by pretty quick and you might as well do everything you can with everything you were given. I look forward to seeing you at the next little weekly presentation.